That climate change
and we did not awake this morning to glorious news, and it all has to do with ruining our society, ruining our culture, destroying the family. Let me just say this within the church. So far, we've been speaking about public schools and the necessity. How's that for a word? Necessity to get your children out of the public schools, no matter what the cost to you. There's no more time. And now we're looking at within the church now, too. I'm not going to give you anything that's not utterly public. Let's see, what is the date on this? Friday. This is Friday's date from LifeSite News. And the headline is Pope Francis invites religious political leaders to sign global pact for new humanism. Did you hear that, beloved? A new humanism. And as you will see, it's not a better humanism. It really is a new humanism, not the one that God gave. This is from Rome on Friday, from LifeSite News. And it said, many of you may have already read it, in a renewed and enthusiastic endorsement of globalism, beloved. I can't speak. Globalism is an attempt to simply control the population of the world. And it will be destructive, it will be immoral, and that's what it attempts to do. Pope Francis has announced he is hosting an initiative for a global pact, PACT, to create a new humanism. The global event to take place at the Vatican on May 14th, 2020, that's next year, is themed Reinventing the Global Educational Alliance. Can you imagine? In the scriptures, St. Paul says, what alliance has Christ with Belial, which is the devil? And now we're doing it. Now it's planned for the church, headed by the Pope, to do it. According to a Vatican statement issued Thursday, September 12th, the Pope is inviting representatives of the main religions, international organizations, and various humanitarian institutions, as well as key figures from the world of politics, economics, and academia, and prominent athletes, scientists, and socialists to sign a global pact on, you got one guess, it has 4 syllables, and it begins with an E, a global pact on education, so as to, quote, hand on to younger generations a united and fraternal common home. And I'll tell you, beloved, it is the common home of the devil. There is no common home we have but heaven and Christianity on earth this side of heaven. We have no common home other than that. A global educational pact, it says, the Pope says, listen, a global educational pact is needed to educate us in universal solidarity and a new humanism. Those are Pope Francis's words on video, beloved. A Vatican-backed website launched to promote the pact added, quote, educating young people in fraternity, in learning to overcome divisions and conflicts, promote hospitality, justice, and peace. Pope Francis has invited everyone who cares about the education of the young generation to sign a global pact, to create a global change of mentality through education. Beloved, that is what the communists set out to do well over 100 years ago. And they were successful, but they also failed in part. And they're failing now to have Orthodox, faithful Catholics succumb to their evil. And so now, to solve that problem, the evil has entered into the church, and it has been bought by the very Pope himself and the hierarchy. The article continues, in a strikingly secular message containing only one throwaway reference to the Lord, and mind you, Christ was never mentioned in this article. Never mentioned. There's nothing of Christianity in this at all. Nothing. Now, I might get emails telling me it's not right to criticize the Pope. I'm simply reading what the Pope has said and what the news has given us. Because if LifeSite News weren't there, and people like the Society for the Public of for the Protection of the Unborn Child wasn't there, other good LifeSite sources, pro-life sources weren't there, how would we know all this? In a strikingly secular message containing only the throwaway reference to the Lord, one throwaway reference to the Lord, Pope Francis called on people to capitalize on our best energies and to be proactive in opening education to a long-term vision, unfettered, that is, unchained by the status quo. Beloved, the evil of this world has long ago upset the status quo. The status quo, the only status quo for us should be what our Lord has given us, the marching orders He has given us to be stewards of His creation and to educate our children. Our Lord never told us to build schools, and there would be nothing wrong with that if the schools were truly Christian and truly taught what our Lord taught and what He would have taught. Sex education, no matter how sophisticated anyone thinks it is, does not belong in any schools. That belongs at home. And there are many good books that older people or children or teenagers before they marry can read. It is the job of the home. The article goes on to say, this, the Pope said, will result in men and women who are open, responsible, prepared to listen, dialogue, and reflect with others, and capable of weaving relationships with families between generations and with civil society, and thus to create a new humanism. Beloved, this is demonic. This is not to protect the family at all. You'll see later on, weaving relationship with families. Quoting Hillary Clinton's favorite aphorism, it takes, quote, it takes a village to raise a child. Pope Francis asserted the need to create an educational village in which, quote, all people, according to their respective roles, share this task of forming a network of open human relationship. I will rephrase that. An educational village which will once and for all destroy the family and the human race. At a time, the article goes on, at a time when the right to homeschool and the right to a free choice of school are threatened, and when countries throughout the world, now this is the This is the editor's, this is LifeSite's commentary, not the Pope's at this point. At a time when the right to homeschool and the right to a free choice of school are threatened, and when countries throughout the world level taxes to provide public schooling to which no Catholic parents could safely send their child, Pope Francis omitted any reference to the prerogatives of parents as the primary educators of their children. I don't believe that was an omission on his part. It is a plan to eliminate parents, to educate the children. Referencing the document on human fraternity and world peace for living together, which he signed with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar in Abu Dhabi. Last February, Francis explained that in this new global village, beloved, the ground must be cleared of discrimination and fraternity must be allowed to flourish. Excuse me for that yawn. Some of these words sound very nice, and the demon that angel describes appears as an angel of light. Am I saying the Pope is demonic? No, I'm saying what he's proposing is demonic. Readers will recall that the Abu Dhabi, forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, DHABI document aroused controversy for stating that, quote, the diversity of religions is willed by God. You see, that's why the Pope can get all the religions and everybody else together. It's willed by God. It is not willed by God, beloved. It is not. There is one religion that God created, and that is Christianity. That is the religion of those who will follow the Christ. Christianity, defined, is the people and the doctrine that follow what our Lord gave. In this kind of village, the Pope also said, an alliance must be forged between the earth's inhabitants and our common home, which we are bound to care for and respect. An alliance that generates peace, justice, and hospitality among all peoples of the human family, as well as dialogue between religions. If this succeeds, beloved, we're going to have that alliance forever in hell, not in heaven. Will wipe out Christianity. Readers will recall that the Abu Dhabi document aroused, hold on. Sorry for my throat this morning. Readers will recall that the Abu Dhabi document aroused controversy for stating that the diversity of religions is willed by God. In this kind of village, the Pope also said, an alliance must be forged between the earth's inhabitants and our common home. The earth's inhabitants and our common home, which we are bound to care for and respect. An alliance that generates peace, justice, and hospitality among all peoples of the human family, as well as dialogue between religions. Not everyone is convinced that peace can be achieved by promoting the Abu Dhabi document. However, Bishop Athanasius Schneider recently observed that however noble such aims as human fraternity and world peace may be, they cannot be promoted at the cost of relativizing the truth of uniqueness of Jesus Christ and his church. I said the name of Christ wasn't mentioned. It's not mentioned by the Pope, but it certainly is mentioned by Bishop Athanasius Schneider. In his message, the Pope said that in order to reach these global objectives as an educating village, we must, quote, have the courage to place the human person at the center, end quote, and to train individuals who are ready to offer themselves in service to the community. This is demonic. As I'm reading it, it's demonic. It's deceptive. I'm going to reread that sentence. In his message, the Pope said that in order to reach these global objectives as an educating village, we must, quote, have the courage to place the human person at the center. Isn't that what is wrong with our world today? Instead of placing Christ at the center, we place man at the center. The article goes on to say he ended his message by inviting, quote, everyone to work for this alliance and to be committed individually and within our communities to nurturing the dream of a humanism rooted in solidarity and responsive both to humanity's aspirations and to God's plan. He threw in God's plan. The two don't mix, beloved. Those are just words to help Christians and moral people not to be concerned about this. We're going for God's plan. There's nothing in here that's of God's plan. Pope Francis has tasked the Vatican's Congregation for Catholic Education with organizing the initiative. According to a website dedicated to the Global Pact, the congregation oversees 216,000 Catholic schools attended by over 60 million pupils and 1,750 Catholic universities with over 11 million students. In explanatory note accompanying the Pope's message, the congregation said that the May 14th, coming up this next year, the May 14th Global Pact Initiative seeks to involve international organizations and the great ones of the earth in helping to heal the fracture between man and the absolute, with a capital A. This is going to heal the fracture between man and the absolute. What do you mean the absolute? What happened to God? Because this now could be anybody's absolute. Anyone, Buddha, Muslims, anyone's absolute. What's the difference? The absolute. That's not one of God's names. And that's not the way the fracture between man and God is healed, by creating a global pact, an educational village. This is not the way. The only way that is healed is through the death and life of Christ and those who give their lives to him and are part of the church he came to establish, which he will keep till the end of time. There's no other way to heal the fracture between God and man, beloved. It also aims to heal the horizontal fracture, not just God and man, which would be vertical. Boy, am I messing up every other sentence. I am so sorry. Does it mean that I'm tired? I don't know, but I'm so sorry. So Pope Francis is speaking of the verbal fracture between God and man, God between the absolute and man. But now we're speaking horizontally. And the article says it also aims to heal the horizontal fracture between men of different cultures, religions, and backgrounds. And it intends to heal the fracture between man, society, nature, and the environment. Move aside, Jesus. Nothing else will do. You didn't know how to do it. We know how to do it. we've come up with a better plan. Let me repeat this. It also aims to heal the horizontal fracture between men of different cultures, religions, and backgrounds, and it intends to heal the fracture between man, society, and nature, and the environment, in the face of an urgent need to create an ecological citizenship, not a heavenly one, beloved, an ecological citizenship based on sustainability and an austere responsibility. Apostle Paul says you are citizens of heaven. Citizens of heaven. This is not our home. The congregation went on to say, the objectives set for the next few decades aim to set up training models that take into account constantly increasing populations, diminishing resources, and the fact that climate change places everyone before a serious responsibility. It places everyone before a serious responsibility, that of developing our planet in a sustainable way with an eye to the needs of future generations. This is the Pope and the congregation he established for the Global Pact. You would think this is some socialist running for president speaking. It goes on to say, this congregation, the choice of education as a ground on which to make a global pact is a priority topic in the horizon of current and future scenarios. But of course, that was the communist plan. The education was their way. Get children when they're young. Get them when they're young. They will grow up with a different mindset. It doesn't matter who the family is, what the family is, how strong they are. The schools will indoctrinate those children. And that's what they're going for today. Education is the key. Absolute key. And I mentioned yesterday, that's what the first Bishop of the United States, Bishop John Carroll in Baltimore, also said. Catholics were not wanted in this country. They weren't allowed to vote. They were persecuted. And Bishop Carroll said the only way to change the minds of society is through education of the children. Conferences and events will be held throughout the coming year to prepare the May 14th signing of the Global Pact on Education. In May 2019, the May past, Pope Francis made a strong push for globalism, calling for a supranational, that's supra, beyond, above nations, legally above individual nations, so it crosses over nations, legally constituted body to enforce United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and to implement climate change policies. Beloved, how does the United Nations reach their Sustainable Development Goals? Through abortion, through contraception, through euthanasia, through corrupting children and schools and families throughout the world. More, this is the last sentence, don't miss this one, beloved. More recently, during an in-flight press conference on his return from a 7-day apostolic visit to Africa, Francis said that our duty, T-U-T-Y, duty, is to obey international institutions such as the United Nations and the European Union. We need to obey the United Nations, beloved, according to the Pope and the European Union. It's Twilight Zone. It's even unthinkable that that would come from the Pope.
When politicians send their thoughts and prayers with no action, we say no more. We can and we will change the world.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Said, the Pope rarely smiles during this kind of photo call. He appeared eager to begin their...
We know that the first 1,000 years there was one church, it's called the Catholic Church, and the word Catholic means universal, it doesn't mean Roman. Catholic means if you're born again, raise your hand if you're born again. You're a Catholic. Brothers and sisters, Luther's protest is over.
Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and what? And the faith of Jesus Christ. This constitutes a part of earth's final warning. Obedience to God's 10 commandments and the faith of Jesus Christ. We will know when the mark of the beast is near, when we see church and state are uniting. When church and state unite, just as in the old world of Europe, etc. When church and state unite, and the church dictates to the state, and the state becomes a church in essence, a Sunday law is near, and we are nearing that crisis. And that's why I'm saying in times like these, my friends, we need an anchor for our souls. And that anchor is faith in Jesus Christ.